Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 126 of the Compassion and Cucumbers podcast. I'm Christine.
And I'm Sam.
How you doing, Sam?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good to hear.
Yeah, no complaints here.
Excellent.
No complaints. Hey, happy Valentine's Day.
Almost.
Well, yeah, almost. When is it? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, happy Valentine's Day tomorrow.
And if you happen to be listening on Wednesday, happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah. And if it's after that, sorry.
Yeah, we could continue this for a while. I shouldn't have. Yeah. No.
Let's talk about what we've been up to. What did we do this weekend?
Well, this weekend, after I finished work on Saturday, we headed down to Pittsburgh to see our beloved niece, Lucy, in a production of Mean Girls.
Before we get into talking about the production a little bit, we did stop at one of our favorite Mexican-American eateries, the Mad Mex.
We did. So we decided to stop at the Erie Mad Mex instead of one of the ones in the Pittsburgh area because, to be quite honest, the Erie Mad Mex is the best one.
Yeah, I agree. It's the better Mad Mex.
Like, seriously, the food quality is always higher. Like, attention to detail is a lot better. So we are very loyal to our Erie Mad Mex.
Yeah, it's the best one. I got the tofu tacos. You got the tofu tacos. As an appetizer, we got the Pennsyltucky tofu.
So there was a lot of tofu on the table.
A lot of tofu, but their tofu's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So we had a little bit of a tofu feast.
Yeah.
And even though it was relatively early in the day, I think it was only about 3:00 when we stopped for late lunch, early dinner.
Between 2 and 3 or something.
Yeah, like that was our last food for the day because we ate so much tofu.
I think we each had like a block of tofu each. And
it had to be close.
Yeah, we didn't need to eat for the rest of the day. That was it. We were good.
We were good. Yep, totally.
Yeah, so Lucy's show was very entertaining.
Oh my gosh.
It's a musical adaptation of the movie Mean Girls.
Yes. Yeah. And I had never seen the movie.
I did years ago when it first came out. I saw it.
Yeah. So I never saw the movie, and I decided when Lucy was cast in this show that I wouldn't listen to the soundtrack. I wouldn't watch the movie. I wouldn't try to learn anything specific about it.
Right. Going blind.
Going blind, because I've been enjoying doing that. I did that with Natasha Pierre in The Great Comet of 1812, and that was such a delightful surprise. So I decided to do the same thing for this. And I have to say, it was funny.
It's a funny show, and Lucy's character was really funny and a departure. She usually plays like the sweet one.
Yeah.
And she was one of the plastics, one of the
three mean girls.
Yeah.
Yes.
But she was like the dumb one.
Right.
So.
Who wasn't actually mean. She just happened to be an accessory.
Yeah.
To like the alpha mean girl.
Yeah. And her lines are really hysterical.
She really was some serious comic relief in a show that really does take an interesting look at like social hierarchy in high school and looks at bullying and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, it touches on some really serious things, you know?
It does, but Lucy was just this spectacular comic relief. Her main song, which is called Sexy, was so funny and just so outside the realm of what I'm used to hearing her sing.
Yeah.
But what was really delightful about it was just how much fun she was very obviously having.
Yeah.
That's always the best thing for me, is to, see her up there just having a blast.
Yeah, they all seem to be having a really good time.
Yeah, they did. So it was a lot of fun.
That was really fun. And then later this week, we're heading to New York City to see some theater. We're going to see Hadestown.
Yes, we are.
And we're going to explore vegan options in the Big Apple.
Yes, because, we haven't managed that yet to just go to New York. So, we didn't want to miss this opportunity to see Hadestown because just a few days ago, actually, on February 9th, there was a cast change, and Ani DeFranco joined the cast of Hadestown as Persephone.
Uh-huh.
And we can't miss that.
No, not at all.
No. So off we go. We'll be getting on a train on Wednesday morning, bright and early. to head to New York, and we're going to see Hadestown Thursday night, and we're coming back on Saturday.
Yeah, it should be a good time.
Yeah, so we'll have a little bit of time to explore the city, a couple days to explore the city and track down some awesome vegan food.
Yeah, we'll definitely report back on that next week.
Sure will.
We'll tell you about everything that we found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it should be fun. And speaking of food, we have our recipe this week.
We sure do.
So here is this week's Vegan Cookbook Challenge recipe of the week. This week, I made a recipe out of a book that we've both had for probably 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
We had 2 copies of this. One of them got donated because you don't need 2 copies of this book.
You don't.
And I think that the copy that we kept was Sam's copy. And this book was published in 1995. It is the Vegetarian Times Complete Cookbook. And I bet a lot of you already have this on your shelves.
Yeah.
If you don't,
It's a staple.
if you don't, it's, I think, out of print, but there are still copies out there on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll include a link to it if you want to check it out. Most of the recipes in this book are vegan. Mm-hmm. The ones that aren't, because it's a vegetarian cookbook, usually include cheese or eggs. And most of them are easily veganized. Mm-hmm. But the recipe that we made out of it, and when I say we, I mean me, was their potato leek soup.
I love a good potato leek soup.
Yeah, and this was a creamy potato leek soup.
As a potato leek soup should be.
Yes, but completely creamed. No chunks of potato or anything.
No.
Yeah. And an interesting thing about this soup is because this book came out before there were lots of plant milk options and stuff like that, is the way that they made it more creamy was by adding, I think it was a 1/4 cup or 1/3 a cup, I can't remember, of white rice into the soup while it's cooking. And then, of course, you blend the soup.
Sure.
So it did make it nice and creamy. But for me, I think it also made it a little gluey.
I agree.
You know, which I thought was a little odd. But like I said, this book's from 1995.
Right.
And so like now I probably wouldn't even have added the rice.
No, I probably wouldn't either. No. Like instead, if you want to get a creamier texture, add some plant milk.
I would have either added a little bit of plant milk or maybe some cashew cream or something.
Oh, yeah. That would be good. That would be really nice.
And it might even not need it. Because with the potatoes and the starch in the potatoes, once you blend it, especially if you're using a high-speed blender and it really activates those starches, I think it would be fine without the rice.
Well, we should try it without the rice then.
It was delicious, though.
It was. It had a really nice flavor. It was very potato forward. The leek kind of got lost.
Yeah, the leek kind of got lost. I'm wondering if maybe I put too many potatoes. I mean, I followed the recipe.
Well, if you followed the recipe, you didn't use too many potatoes.
Yeah, I don't know. But the leeks did kind of get lost in the potato flavor, which I was surprised because leeks usually...
You would think.
Yeah.
Now, granted, in the spoonfuls, because Christine topped this also with some green onion, with some sliced green onion.
Yeah.
And so when I got the green onion, I feel like the leek also popped out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I also thought that maybe the leek would have come out a little bit more if there had been a touch more salt.
I salted it and salted it again and tasted it and salted it.
Well, then I am obviously incorrect.
Well, I mean, it's not for a lack of salt.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
I didn't want to oversalt it.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So it was a lovely soup. Like I said, very potato forward, but nice and creamy.
Yeah.
And I would love to try it again without the rice.
I would totally tweak. This is a totally tweakable recipe. And I love a tweakable recipe.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, because this recipe is from 1995, you know, ingredients change, whatever. I would definitely make it again and then make some changes.
Small alterations, yeah.
Some less potatoes so that the leeks come through.
Fewer potatoes.
That's one of Sam's pet peeves is the incorrect use of
less or fewer.
Right.
Yeah.
Fewer potatoes.
Thank you.
And I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I'd add the rice. Anyway, I would make this again, definitely, because the flavor was great. It just needs some tweaking. This is a great cookbook. And like I said, a lot of people already have this on their shelves. This was kind of like a staple cookbook. I mean, when I was vegetarian, I lived by this cookbook.
Yeah.
I made all kinds of stuff out of this cookbook. So it was fun dig back into it because it's been a while since I dug through this book.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's that. And like I said, I'll leave a link to the book if you'd like to get a copy of the Vegetarian Times Complete Cookbook. And these are recipes that came out of the magazine, the Vegetarian Times, if you're not familiar, which I used to subscribe to. And then I think actually in the magazine one time they had a card or something where you got like a deal on this cookbook, and that's how I got mine.
Probably.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar. I think I might have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Moving on, in this week's Noteworthy section, we ask the question, why are vegan fine dining options so lacking in protein?
Yeah, we got a message from listener Kristen that mentioned that her family had gone out to a fine dining establishment, and while they were glad that they had vegan options, she just noticed that there was no significant protein served in any of their vegan options. And I've found that looking at fine dining options and even solely vegan fine dining options that they seem to focus very heavily on just vegetables.
Which I personally think is awesome.
Yeah, it's great, but in a way, it's like because you're paying a lot of money to eat at these restaurants.
You certainly can, yes.
Yeah. And you're just getting, plates with the little thing of vegetables with some really fabulous sauce, probably presented very beautifully. But it's not a very satiating meal, you know what I mean?
I do.
And it's not nutritionally complete as a meal. I just think that it's interesting that it's just the opposite of what most vegan restaurants that aren't fine dining establishments, where they're serving almost all proteins.
Yeah, certainly. You do see a lot in, kind of your diner style vegan restaurants, which tend to be quite popular because what they're doing is, kind of replacing those imminently craveable foods that people will feel like they're missing when they kind of transition to veganism. And so they do rely very heavily on meat substitutes, cheese substitutes, those kinds of things. And so the vegetables can get a little bit lost. So it does seem that the opposite thing is happening on the fine dining end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I just found that really interesting. Let us know if you've been to any like vegan fine dining restaurants and if you've experienced this lack of protein on your plate when you order from those restaurants.
Now, let us qualify this segment by saying we are very aware this is a first world problem.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so it's just a curiosity.
Yeah, I find it curious. Give me some tofu. Give me some tempeh.
Okay.
You know?
I will. If I ever have a fine dining establishment, I will give you tofu and tempeh.
Make it fancy. Or even seitan. Seitan's loaded with protein.
Oh, gotta love seitan.
Yeah. So thanks, Kristen, for reminding me that I too have noticed that and that I find it odd.
Okay, then.
That brings us to our main topic. And in today's main topic, we're going to be talking about an advocate that we've talked about in the past. You might remember that we talked about Mr. Wayne Hsiung in the past. He was tried and sentenced back in November to 2 years of probation and time served for rescuing 70 chickens and ducks from a farm in Petaluma, California.
Yes.
Well, he's going to be back in the courtroom again this March, and he's kind of asking for our help.
So this post on Wayne's blog, The Simple Heart, is titled The War on Dogs and was published on Friday, February 9th. Millions of our canine friends have been radiated, poisoned, and sent into space. This series will show how we can end the violence. A quiet war has been raging over the last 75 years. Its victims are typically unnamed and forgotten, though they've played a crucial role in a number of historical events. The dropping of the atomic bomb, the first flight into space orbit, and even the inception of modern medical tests. And while the war has been a vicious one, the losses, which number in the millions, have occurred entirely on one side. The war I am speaking of is the war on dogs, and I face trial on March 18th, just over a month from today, because of my efforts to end that war and bring peace to the animals who love us most. Over the next few weeks, I'll be writing about how that war began and how we can bring it to an end. But to start that journey, we have to tell the story of the dog who was sent to space. I wrote a few weeks ago about the origins of the beagle as the chosen animal for laboratory experiments. Scientists picked dogs, and the beagle specifically, because they would tolerate years of abuse, including radiation exposure that was 1,000 times what was considered safe. But the use of dogs quickly expanded from atomic tests to other experiments. This includes space flights. Laika was the first animal sent into orbit by scientists in the USSR in 1957. The scientists knew Laika was being shipped to her death. They had no way of bringing her home. They chose a dog because, of all the species, dogs were the most likely to survive in a tiny capsule for endless days. Indeed, they manipulated Laika for many weeks by placing her in smaller and smaller cages, promising her each time that she would not be hurt. But that promise was broken with her last cage, which was rocketed into space. It's unclear if she died from overheating or suffocation, but we know it was slow and painful. Radio signals from the tiny spaceship show that her heart rate skyrocketed to 240 beats per minute, then stayed elevated for many hours before she died in terror and pain. But perhaps the most important expansion in the use of dogs occurred with toxicology tests. With the massive profusion of chemicals in post-World War II society, someone needed to determine whether the substances were safe. Thus, the toxicology testing system was invented, whereby animals would ingest massive amounts of potentially poisonous substances, and scientists would wait to see if they died. Like radiation tests, toxicology experiments required a victim who was easy to manipulate. Animals would need to be force-fed toxic substances every day, then observed for days, weeks, or even months. Facilities like Ridglan Farms raised thousands of beagles to fill this demand. In 1974, for example, researchers at an institute called the Lovelace Foundation decided they would study the toxicity of industrial chemicals used in laundry detergents. They chose 54 Ridglan beagles for the test. All the dogs were sacrificed for study after 6 days. But many lived much shorter periods of time, vomiting blood for hours before they collapsed and died within a single day. The descriptions of the deaths are so grim, necrotic, ulcerated, gross lesions. It's hard to believe they're even real. The Lovelace Foundation, however, was only one of hundreds of corporations that began to use dogs in toxicology tests. And at the industry's height in the 1970s, more than 200,000 dogs were used every year in scientific research. But something changed beginning in the early 1980s. The use of dogs began to dramatically fall, and by the early 2000s, the number dropped to about one-third its former size, or about 70,000 per year. While some commentary points to the use of molecular models as an explanation for this decline, that doesn't quite explain the change. The total use of animals increased over much of that same time period, despite the rise of molecular models. It was only dogs, cats, and other charismatic animals who saw their numbers drop. Something else important happened in the 1980s: the birth of animal rights. In 1981, PETA executed the first undercover investigation of a vivisection facility in American history in Silver Springs, Maryland. Monkeys were found with fingerless hands, exposed to the bone after their nerves had been severed in gruesome surgical experiments. While the authorities initially seized the poor creatures as victims of cruelty, a judge ordered them returned. The monkeys miraculously disappeared before the judge's order was enforced. It was the first ALF liberation in U.S. history. That story is told in Ingrid Newkirk's groundbreaking book, Free the Animals, a must-read. For the first time in history, the abuse of animals in labs became a subject of public dispute, And when the public was shown the truth, the public did not like what it was seeing. For the next 20 years, vivisection, especially of charismatic species like dogs, was on the defense. Then something changed again and halted progress around the year 2000. For years after the Silver Springs case, the greatest fear of vivisectors was legal exposure. A criminal prosecution would not just threaten the individual vivisector. It posed a threat to the existence of the corporation that was sponsoring the experiments. But after years of animal rights exposés, the biomedical industry found a solution. Instead of defending themselves from legal action, they could just take over the government. The United States Department of Agriculture, which was charged with enforcing the Animal Welfare Act, became a revolving door for industry beginning in the early 2000s. The appointed leader of the USDA for decades was someone who took a consumer perspective on the department's mission. But beginning in 2005, the USDA has been controlled by corporate interests under both Republican and Democratic administrations. And animals, including dogs, have paid the price. For example, the USDA's own internal watchdog noted in 2005 that enforcement actions against animal abusers had become basically meaningless. Vivisectors were treating animal abuse allegations as a cost of business, and not a very expensive one at that. This continued through the next decade, with reports by the internal watchdog in 2010 and 2014 making the same finding. The government was asleep at the wheel. It is no surprise that over this same time period, the numbers of animals used in research, including dogs, ended their decline, despite increasing public opposition to the use of animals in medical tests. From a high of over 2 million, excluding birds and rodents, the total number of animals used in research dropped to around 700,000 by the 2000s and has not budged since. The use of dogs in particular plateaued in the early 2000s at around 60,000. This is not because the industry has ended the torture of dogs. While vivisectors have become smarter about disclosing the details of their experiments, there are still shockingly gruesome details published in public scientific journals. For example, in 2016, 36 Ridglan beagles were used for toxicology testing of a new artificial sweetener called monotin. The male dogs saw their testicles shrink, and all the pups were exsanguinated, drained of their blood, so their bodies could be vivisected. In 2014, 12 beagles were filled up with fluid, like balloons, until their leg muscles blew up and bled. They were observed for 2 weeks, then vivisected. Scientists found that their muscles were necrotic, dead and rotting, as a result of the experiment. In short, the abuse continues. The difference is that the industry has much less concern that abuse will lead to consequences. Perhaps the most important reason for this is that the government has not only declined to enforce the law, it has actively conspired with the industry to cover up misdeeds. In 2006, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act passed, threatening activists with federal charges for otherwise nonviolent acts. One of the new law's first uses was the prosecution of activists as terrorists for chalking against vivisection on public sidewalks. In the early 2010s, ag-gag laws spread across the nation, criminalizing the act of taking a photograph in a factory farm or lab. But in 2017, the industry offered its masterstroke. It made all the animal welfare inspection records disappear by convincing the USDA to shut down its public records database. It should come as no surprise that within 1 year of that records purge, the enforcement of federal animal cruelty law fell off a cliff. Administrative complaints, the primary mechanism for enforcement, dropped from 23 in 2016 to 2 in 2017, and only 1 in 2018. Warnings went from 192 to 157 to 39. And perhaps most disturbingly, civil penalties dropped from 3.8 million to 0.47 million to 0.16 million. For an industry that receives $15 billion a year in government subsidies, that $0.16 million was less than a drop in the bucket. The events of 2016-17 demonstrated the industry's immense political power. You may have convinced one government official on one occasion to enforce the laws protecting animals from abuse. But over the long term, the industry showed we control the levels of power. The war on dogs, which had been challenged so successfully by exposure and accountability, was starting again, and the government was firmly on the side of those who were killing dogs. And that's where we stepped in. As enforcement was plummeting and abuse surging, I and a number of other activists decided we needed to take direct action. So we stepped into Ridglan Farms. What we found has the potential, at our upcoming trial, to permanently end the war on dogs. I'll tell the next stages of that story in the coming weeks, but in the meantime, please help us get ready for that trial.
And as you can see, once you put any government agency in charge of anything, it's the level of corruption.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, corruption. It skyrockets. Good choice. Yeah, it skyrockets. And now, okay, this animal abuse, which is what it is subsidized by our tax dollars.
Yes.
And these trials are really important, mainly because we're not talking about factory farmed animals. These cases appeal to everyone, not just to vegans. And that's a really important point. We have to get this stuff out into the public, to everyone, dog lovers, cat lovers, and people who consider themselves animal lovers, so that they know what's happening. And so that public pressure can be put on the courts to have them decide in favor of the animals and in favor of the animals' rights to exist without this sort of torture.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Wayne and his team, who will be fighting their case on March 18th, have created a Google Doc explaining some of the help that they need from us, from the public. And in this document are links so that you can send to your representatives letters asking them to support a fair outcome in not only this trial, but in this industry. The fact that the USDA no longer keeps those documents and there's no freedom of information that will help us here, because the information's not there. They've just disseminated all of the reporting.
Yes.
So it's not like you can even insist on information, as far as reports of abuse and stuff like that in these industries.
Right. Now, in this document, there are some wonderful resources to share. One of them is the investigative report by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist on the investigation and rescue at Ridglan. And that is called Bred to Suffer. That is linked in the document. Also is a short video produced by DXE regarding the investigation and rescue. That's called Inside a Secret Lab.
Yeah.
And there's also The Dogs of Science, which is the full investigative report co-authored by Wayne Hsiung and journalists Leslie and Michael Goldberg. And in that document, they describe their findings at Ridglan Farms.
So on March 18th, Wayne and two of his fellow animal advocates will face felony burglary charges and theft charges that can hold up to a 16-year sentence in prison for rescuing 3 beagles, including a blind puppy named Julie, from one of the largest beagle breeding and research facilities in the nation, Ridglan Farms. It's in Dane County near Madison, Wisconsin. So I would please implore you to click on this document, and if you can't reach out to people, at least read what's in it and absorb some of the information that's in here, because it's hideous. Especially what really strikes me is that they use beagles in these experiments because beagles are very loyal, trusting, gentle.
Yes, they're using the best parts of their nature against them.
They're totally using the best parts of their nature
against
them, and it's hideous. It's really hideous. So like I said, the link will be in the show notes.
So at the end of this document also, we just want you to know that there is information about other campaigns that are moving forward, as well as contact information. So you can sign the DXE petition to support, and you can also subscribe to the Simple Heart newsletter.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just important. These are important cases because they don't focus on farmed animals. And unfortunately, we have to face the fact that non-vegans find this more hideous than the animal agriculture industry.
Yes, that does seem to be the case.
Yeah.
In general.
So it's easier to garner support for campaigns like this because it's dogs, and people have a soft spot in their heart, for dogs and cats.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So we definitely wish Wayne and his companions the best.
As always.
On March 18th, we'll be following up on it, and we'll let you know how things work out for them.
So moving on to a lighter topic.
Yes, please.
Yes, let's. We have this week's helpful tip to encourage you to go and stay vegan. This week, we want to encourage you to stay informed. Staying informed about vegan news, resources, and developments in plant-based nutrition is crucial for making informed choices and staying motivated on your vegan journey. Here are some strategies to help you stay up to date. Follow vegan news outlets. Subscribe to vegan magazines, newsletters, and websites to receive updates on the latest news, research, and trends in the vegan community. Some popular vegan news outlets include Veg News, Plant-Based News, and Live Kindly.
Yeah, I also recommend reaching out to all animal advocacy sites, and almost every one of them has a subscription thing, or you can type in your email and you will get, you don't get barraged, because I belong to a ton of them. You don't get barraged. You get a bi-weekly email letting you know what campaigns they're working on and et cetera. It's good to keep up on that.
Absolutely. You can also follow vegan activists, organizations, influencers, and nutritionists on social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. They often share valuable information, articles, recipes, and resources related to veganism and plant-based nutrition. You can join online communities, participate in vegan forums, Facebook groups, Reddit communities, and other online platforms where members discuss vegan topics, share experiences, ask questions, and provide support. Engaging with these communities can help you stay connected and informed.
You can attend events and workshops. We love attending events and workshops.
Yes, we do.
Keep an eye out for vegan events, workshops, conferences, and webinars happening in your area or online. These events often feature expert speakers, cooking demonstrations, panel discussions, and opportunities to learn about the latest developments in veganism and plant-based nutrition.
You can read books and publications. Explore books, articles, and scientific journals written by experts in the fields of veganism, nutrition, and animal rights. Look for reputable sources that provide evidence-based information and practical advice for living a healthy vegan lifestyle.
One of my favorites, watch documentaries and films.
Yeah, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah, watch the films and documentaries that explore various aspects of veganism, including health, environmental sustainability, and animal welfare. Documentaries like What the Health, Fork Over Knives, and Cowspiracy offer valuable insights into the benefits of plant-based eating and the impact of animal agriculture.
And there are just so many out there now.
Yeah.
It used to be that kind of Forks Over Knives and What the Health were kind of the gold standard. And there are so many to choose from now.
There's a ton of them out there.
It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, just type into your search engine vegan documentaries and a veritable plethora of films.
No matter what streaming service you use, chances are you'll be able to find at least 3 or 4
you'll find
vegan-forward documentaries.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You'll find a lot of them for free on YouTube also.
There you go.
Yep. And this is our very, very favorite tip.
Subscribe to podcasts. Listen to podcasts dedicated to veganism, plant-based nutrition, animal rights, and related topics. Podcasts are a convenient way to stay informed while commuting, exercising, or doing household chores. Some popular vegan podcasts include the Plant-Based News Podcast, the Rich Roll Podcast, and Nutrition Rounds Podcast.
I would also highly recommend How I Vegan Podcast.
And the Compassion and Cucumbers podcast.
Veg Your Best is also a good one. It's like a coaching. If you need help in this area, her podcast is great for like vegan coaching. And last but not least, follow scientific research. Stay up to date on scientific research related to veganism, plant-based nutrition, and health by subscribing to academic journals or websites and newsletters. Look for studies conducted by reputable researchers and institutions that provide insight into the health benefits of a vegan diet and the environmental impact of animal agriculture.
By incorporating these strategies into your routine, you can stay informed about vegan news, resources, and developments in plant-based nutrition, empowering yourself to make informed choices and stay motivated on your vegan journey.
This would be our favorite part of the show, but I am sad to inform you that
I can't believe the day has come.
There is no listener shout-out this week.
Like, seriously, I'm heartbroken
here.
I
warned you. For weeks I've been warning you that my list was waning. I have come to the end of my listener shout-out list. So if you would like a shout-out, or if you would like to recommend somebody else for a shout-out.
That's right. You don't have to recommend yourself for a shout-out.
Nominate somebody you know that listens to the show. Maybe somebody you listen with.
I love that.
Yeah.
So much.
And just drop us a line. Seriously, all it takes is drop us a line, drop me a DM on Instagram or a private message on Facebook and say, hey, I listen, or my friend so-and-so listens and would love a shout out. And then we will shout out that person.
We sure will.
And not only that, we'll send you
some free stuff.
We send you a bag o' swag.
Yes.
And that bag usually includes a t-shirt, a sticker pack, some buttons, anything else I can find laying around the house that I thought you might enjoy. You never know. I might slip a candy bar in there. You just never know what you're going to get with the swag bag.
All right. Time for our vegan org of the week. This week, we're looking at the Animal Legal Defense Fund. ALDF is a legal advocacy organization committed to protecting the rights and interests of animals through the legal system. They work on cases involving animal cruelty, animal testing, and animal exploitation, and they also advocate for stronger animal protection laws. To learn more and support them, you can go to aldf.org.
Yeah, that's an appropriate organization.
Sure is.
To put the spotlight on this week.
Good choice.
That brings us to our wrap-up. Wrapping it up, and we're not even at an hour yet. It's amazing. Yeah, just a few calls to action for you. As usual, we encourage you to join the AFA Vegan Voter Hub, and we always put the link in the show notes, so please join the Vegan Voter Hub. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. We always appreciate that. You can also leave us a review or a rating on your podcast app. We love that. And send us your favorite vegan recipes for our listener recipe series so we can try them and then talk about them on the show.
Yep, we do love doing that. And with that, it's time to sign off.
Oh, already?
Indeed.
Oh.
You have just listened to episode 126 of the Compassion and Cucumbers podcast, and there's nothing left to say but where cukes and compassion are always the fashion on the podcast.
Thanks, James.
Have a great week, everyone.
We'll talk to you next Tuesday.
We love you.
We really do. Bye.
The end.
If you'd like to support the Compassion and Cucumbers podcast, well, you can do that by hopping on over to our Patreon page and becoming a patron. We have all the recipes from our Vegan Kitchen series up there, and we'll be adding some patron-only episodes in the near future. So thank you for supporting us at whatever level that you choose, and thank you again for listening to Compassion and Cucumbers podcast.